Let's talk about the very best cavalry marches you can make in Rise of Kingdoms from the very top of it, which is what pairings should I use, all the way down to the talents, the equipment, the armaments, the whole 9 yards. Now, this is a sequel to a video I made the last time cavalry were released in the game, and cavalry are in the weirdest place in the history of the game because they released Nevsky ages ago, and everything since he came into the game has basically been equivalent to him for the open field. It's a little bit weird, but we can break down all that nuance, courtesy of insights from Casting Ark of Osiris League. Season 8 just finished, and we had a guest host, the leader of 1093, who won their league, by the way, their realm, and that is Silent Flow. And he talked about the nuances of some of these cavalry choices, and we'll share them with you today. So if this is the kind of stuff you like, subscribe to the channel, and as a reminder, please do use the timestamps to jump to whichever part you'd like. Now, I always try to give advice based on personal experience when I can, which is why I've maxed a lot of the commanders that have arrived into the game, including the most recent Belisarius Prime. I've used him in KVK, and I've got some strong feelings about how he performed. But if you are just getting to the end game, there's only a handful of cavalry commanders you really need to know about. You need to know about Huo, you need to know about Nevsky, you need to know about Joan, you need to know about Belisarius Prime, and of course we'll also talk about William. But the commander that you would pick, if you're just getting to Season of Conquest, and I know this is going to be a little contentious, but hear me out, is going to be the Joan. Because even with a low number of skills, she's actually going to be insane. At 5, 1, 1, and ideally you get 5 skill points on the last skill, Joan Prime is amazing. And then you can pair with almost any other cavalry commander you want, and you can work on other projects. And I actually don't know if I was like brand new to the end game that I would go and max Joan right now. I just get her in a good spot and then go work on somebody else. And I almost feel like, you know, when you work on your 1 cavalry march to start, you get your Joan to like 5115 or whatever it lands on. It's going to be great. And then from there, you then wait until a new cavalry commander shows up. If you had Minamoto, you use it as like a holdover, especially if you were a spender. You could use a commander as like a secondary like Mehmed. But what am I getting at here? Well, the uncontroversial best combo in the game for cavalry is Nevsky with Joan. And it's 2024. And this dude came out in like what, 2020? 2021? He's getting old, man. So I'm not going to tell you to go drop a ton of sculptures into Nevsky and Joan off rip, but I will say they are probably the best combo that you can muster right now. Nevsky is extremely tanky. That is because of his expertise skill, giving you health when he is targeted and also reducing damage you take. But he's also doing a lot of damage and a nice debuff. Joan does some nice buffing, area of effect damage, and this final skill gives you an opportunity to use your active skills all over again. It's disgusting. You use the Nevsky as the primary if what you want to do is maximize damage, but if you want to maximize effectiveness in large group fights, then you go for the Joan as the primary. This also is what you use in Ark of Osiris League, and yes, we'll get to the talents in a bit. This means that your second best march is going to be Huo with William, and this is the combo, if I'm remembering correctly, that we talked about in our Ark of Osiris League cast today, where if you're going to focus on, you know, sort of controlling big fights, you would rather have the William over the Belisarius Prime, which is a little bit wild. Why is that? Well, Belisarius Prime does make the thing you are targeting take more damage if you have him maxed out. But what William does, it's just insane. He, when you hit multiple targets with his area of effect damage from his active skill, is going to make it so that his army and 4 other nearby troops, the priority, by the way, will be targeting your troop, get 20% defense and 50 rage per second for 3 seconds. That effect is gangbuster. Not only does he have area of effect damage, but also the buff here is absolutely nuts. So if you're making 2 cav marches in 2024, Nevsky with Joan, or if you prefer for group fights, and I know I often do, Joan with Nevsky, then you use Huo with William, and you're good. The alternative is, of course, to swap out the William for the Belisarius Prime. If you're the kind of person who's swarming structures, then the Belisarius Prime is better for Ark, but for most people, for open fielding, it turns out that Belisarius is not exactly necessary, but he is not bad. It's just the effect is slightly stronger with the William, but it's 2024, and William, dude, when did he come to the game? He's old. I don't know that I would say, like, right now, go invest in him. I unlocked him in 2020. All right, look at that. 2020 8-3. I don't know if that's March of 2020. And then I unlocked Nevsky. Okay, so this is the month over here. Oh, he's 2022. Dang. Okay, Nevsky's not as old as I thought, but still old as heck. But like William is old as heck. All right. Now, I did mention earlier that if you are making your way into the Season of Conquest, that is the end game, you could use a maxed out Minamoto. That is because the 4th skill is pretty legit. It applies a debuff onto the enemy, making them take 30% more all damage. Very nice. But also there's this little building over here called called the Museum, and the Museum does magical things. If you get a double relic, you're looking at another 60% of stats, which makes Minamoto a solid holdover until you get better stuff. So if you're going with Cavalry in 2024, as of the summer, your best bet is to start with a few amount of skills into a Joan. Ideally, you can wait till the next Cavalry cycle shows up, but otherwise, feels weird to say invest in Nevsky, but I think the overwhelming majority of people would say to invest in this commander from 2022. You could go and you could invest in the Belisarius, hoping that it will be better over time, but it does feel like he has a little bit of a niche role for players with lots of marches, like 7, or that are just swarming structures in general, and most players of this game are not doing that. So good news, bad news. They released a commander that you don't need to max, but also is not going to increase the power level of most pure open field squads. But that does mean you can save sculptures for the next thing, which many people have been doing. So if you are going to put some talents onto these commanders and you want to maximize your effectiveness for the skill and cavalry combo, this is what you use. It is extremely uncontroversial. You're going to max out the skill tree. You're going to go up into the right here and take Emblazoned Shield. Then you're going to go and grab Undying Fury and, of course, Halberd. Really, really solid. This is the tree that you use. Very powerful. If you are using Joan as the primary, then instead you will put 2 points into Rejuvenate. Now, you only need 2. Because of the way rage generation works, there is a maximum that you can generate per turn. I won't cover it all in this video, but I'll have a card up in the top. You want to go check that out later. From there, you put 2 points into emergency protection. I dropped 4 into Emblazoned Shield and 4 into disarm. You could drop one of these disarm points and put that into emergency protection, and I think that might be the better choice. I swarm stuff, so that's why I've got this set up this way. For Arc of Osiris, you want the Joan as the primary because you are getting along your path to Rejuvenate. This talent right over here, it's Hasty Departure. 60% march speed for 10 seconds after leaving a structure is really nuts. The only other talent tree I think we would need to talk about for Cavalry might be if you wanted to put some points into Conquering. I generally don't think that you need to go and put points into Conquering, but if you were going to, here is a build where I've shaved off a few points and dropped them in over here, okay? I kind of prefer this debuff personally, but you have options. You could go and get the Buckler Shield, reducing counterattack damage you take. We could talk, I suppose, about Belisarius as a primary, but to be real with you, this is an open field guide. This is really not an open field thing. This is more of like a gathering Slayer / be annoying combo. I mean, I guess we could look at some talents for that. In fact, you know what? I made a whole video about that. Card will be up in the top. If that's what you want, you can do it to your heart's content, all right? So now that we've covered the talents and we've covered the combos, we do need to go more in depth on the equipment, and I get, and this is an endgame set, and how do I get to that point? So let's start with the things that are super, super high value to craft and work our way up to the best set, all right? And there are some things that are very obvious as a new player. You're gonna start out and you're gonna make the Vanguard Halberd, which has an insane amount of stats for the materials. You're gonna make its set piece, which is the Greaves, and you are gonna enjoy that for a really, really long time, okay? There are upgrades, however. When we look to the boots, probably your best starting point is Windswept, and then eventually you'll graduate up to the epic tier of boots here. The Cloud Racers, these are not amazing, but they are what they are. Eventually you will upgrade pants, and these pants are pretty good. Right over here, Gladiator, it's 8% health. Let me give you a core principle for all Decisions equipment. Health is better than defense, and defense is better than attack. That's the general rule of thumb. People used to really be obsessed with attack, and I thought it was an error, and I went and I tested it, and I proved it was an error. It was slightly less efficient. It'll be up in the top if you want to go check it out. Not that attack is bad, but like health is better than defense, and defense is better than attack. Generally speaking, that has to do with the way that scaling works. So you'll have these Vanguard Greaves. Eventually you will upgrade to these epic pants. These epic pants will be one of the last things you want to upgrade from because they're just so damn good for what their material cost is. All right. Now for gloves, you actually have a kind of insane option here. Asset Sufferance is completely insane. 3% attack, 3% health. When you talent this, it's 4% of each. This is another one of those pieces you just don't want to upgrade from for a really long time. At the chest piece, you've got the Milanese plate as a starting point. Cav defense is pretty nice. You can upgrade to Windswept You get the 2-piece bonus on your cavalry stats and your march speed. Okay, not terrible, but not amazing. From there, you will eventually go and upgrade to the Dark Lord's Blessing, which gives you cavalry defense, which is pretty nice. But you can do better than that, and we'll get there when we start talking about legendaries. For your helmet slot here is a little bit weird because you have cav attack. I don't love it. You'd almost rather hang on to the Expedition Warhelm for a pretty long amount of time. Get this thing talented, you get your cav defense. Eventually, you upgrade to the Abyssal Visage, and you'll want to upgrade from this somewhat quickly because you can stat swap from having attack to defense. We will get to that point. Final piece we need to talk about here is right over here, the Vanguard Halberd. Like I said, you're going to use this for a long time. Eventually, when you have lots of materials, your upgrade point is going to be a Heart of a Saint, and the Heart of the Saint does have defense, which is a fantastic stat to get. You're going to be pretty happy to use this for a long time as well. Now, when we talk about your first upgrades to Legendary, I think there are some pretty obvious choices here. The thing that you want to go for is actually the set piece, and it is a 2-piece bonus that is going to give you, I think, your most stats per material committed. And the chest piece is going to be giving you health. So that is a stat swap from defense to health, which is a huge win. But on the boots, you're stat swapping from attack to health, which is a huge win. So you go for those boots, go for that chest piece, and that gives you the 2-piece bonus of 3% health. This is pretty much a staple for all things cavalry to get these pieces in place. From there, over time, you can make incremental upgrades, and whether or not you go for the sort of 4-piece bonus, which is what I've done here, or you skip that and you go to KVK pieces, depends on how far into the end game you are and whether or not you are a cavalry player who's more focused on open field, right? Or if you're a rally lead, you might make some different choices, but this would be the alternative. And I do think that a talented sword and a talented helm that you start to put iconic tiers into are going to be much better than what I've done over here. But I don't have the conquest coins to go upgrade those insane KVK pieces of equipment. So I'm using the set pieces here. And this is what I would argue probably is my best set for cavalry. All right. And I've gone in and I've taken these to iconic tier 4 and iconic tier 2. I will upgrade this further to take it to iconic tier 4 for the damage on the map. That is a very powerful effect. We'll talk more about the iconic tiers in a minute, but you'll want to eventually upgrade this helmet and this weapon to the legendary tier. You either do KVK or you do set like I've done here, and those are great choices. Eventually, your final 2 upgrades will be to Navarre's Control, which is just the same amount of stats as you're getting base from the epic piece, but at least you can put an iconic crystal on this because it's legendary. And the legs, they are going to give you more health, which is awesome, but you already had a lot of health, like 10.5% on the epic legs. So this is a pretty expensive upgrade. You do it to put an iconic crystal on there, and that is giving you more base stats. You can see that right over here. That is powerful enough to say, like, yeah, okay, we commit the materials, we do the upgrade. So the only truly urgent legendary pieces here, and urgent used very loosely, is the chest piece and the boots. Then you do helmet and weapon, okay? Helmet as a priority over weapon because you're doing a stat swap on that helmet. And then eventually, toward the tail end of working on your equipment, you go back and you do these final 2 pieces. I don't particularly like the full 6 piece. And, you know, there's a number of reasons why that's the case, but we can talk about that for just a second. 2 reasons why this matters. First of all, now that iconic equipment and iconic tiers are in the game, you have so many sets you need to be collecting that anywhere you can weave in these patterns that you can get for free, it's a huge win. So sure, like you could do these gloves. They have defense, so I'd rather have the health anyways. You do these pants, okay? They have attack. I'd rather have health anyways, okay? You could get to that 6-piece bonus, extra defense. I mean, you could do that, or you could take the W of these free-to-play obtainable patterns in the assets, the Navarre's Control, and in the legs, that's the Ash of the Dawn, right? I think that is a massive W. You take that W anywhere you can get it, okay? So that's what I would be doing with equipment. Now, with regard to accessories and their priority, obviously to start, you don't have a lot of materials to commit to accessories. I mean, you get your like Call of the Loyal, you're feeling pretty good about life. When you're ready, you upgrade to a Silent Trial and a Delayans. The 2 of those are very powerful. I've covered those both in depth in other videos. I'll have a card up in the top where you can pick kind of which one of these you would prefer to have. But eventually you start talking about legendaries. And when we talk about legendaries, there's really only one way to go. And that one way to go is a ring and a horn. At this moment in time anyways. Maybe they'll release new cavalry, do new things. And at that time, we could have a different conversation. But for now, ring and horn's where it's at. Horn is going to help you generate rage. This is really massive. More rage means faster active skills. Ring is going to make it so that periodically you do way more damage. You love to see it. Definitely do not get suckered in by the Pendant of Eternal Night. This thing is kind of a waste of materials. I probably should even dismantle it at this point. It is a little bit of a tragedy that I just don't even want to talk about. GG. If you dismantle a legendary, you do lose half your legendary materials. So it stings to be making that choice, especially a legendary accessory. Now, I made it back before we had a lot of other powerful options like you see here, but yeah, it is more than just a bit of a yikes that I'm actually probably going to dismantle that. So let's switch topics. Let's talk about armaments and inscriptions, all right? So in the formation system, given that all your cavalry right now are doing skill damage, the wedge formation's where it's at. It's really kind of a no-brainer, especially when you look at what the very best you can get is for this formation. Hunter. Okay, you get a 5% boost to skill damage. Avs are all about skill damage. And when you deal direct damage to a single target, it's increased by another 10%. So look, like Belisarius Prime, single target cav damage, right? Nevsky, single target cav damage. Huo, single target cav damage. But even then, if you do AoE with Joan, all right, or William, you still get an increase of an extra 2% over here, which is really nice. So, you know, this formation is really all about cranking the skill damage, maybe even generating some rage in some of these other spots. I'd have to take a look around, a little bit of damage resistance, but for the most part, these legendary inscriptions are kind of unobtainium unless you spend lots of money or get extremely lucky. You could consider the blues. That also requires a good bit of luck or spending to get those into a great spot. Now, if you rally or garrison, you can make the argument for the arch formation. It increases normal attack damage and is very good anti-swarm. But otherwise, people aren't really using, even for Ark of Osiris League, the triple line formation, which would give you a lot of march speed. Instead, it's really just all about wedge formation right now. No other formation is truly relevant. All right, now when it comes to the inscriptions for your wedge formation, generally speaking, as I mentioned with equipment, health is going to be better than defense, which is going to be better than attack. And in general, I would say all damage is better than all of these things by a factor of almost like 2 to 1. And the reason that that is really powerful compared to stats is that stats have diminishing return. The more of them you get, the less value you get per stat gained. And there's just so dang many ways to get stats in this game right now. So things that boost skill damage, boost all damage are very, very powerful. I really like those. Few of my favorite armaments and really inscriptions end up on this flag specifically. And what you're really looking for is assertive. 2% all damage when you're on the map is a thing. Cohesive is a worse version of that, but it works in more situations, which won't matter to most people. The Wielder's Troop deals an extra 2% all damage when it has over 50% of units remaining. Strategic, 2% damage to surrounded troops. You should be surrounding most things you're fighting because you use more than one march in the open field, right? So those are some of the best inscriptions you can get. And now look, when it comes to working on your armaments and doing rerolls, you got to prioritize somewhere. I would personally focus on making one best cavalry set. And then when you get new armaments that qualify as your new best, you take items and you move them down to your second set. I think it's a little bit of a mistake to use precious transmutation stones, if you have them, to be re-rolling your armaments for a main set and then a second set, and then some new thing comes along and it's going to replace something from your second set. And it's like, oh man, I spent transmutation stones on that? Like, GG. Big GG, all right? Now, I mentioned earlier that you should do one march of each troop type. And the reason is because of this armament system, in part. You will get armaments with a ton of randomness. You might get a ton for the troop type you care about, but if it just unfolds in a way that we would expect, statistically, you should get an equal amount of infantry, archer, and cavalry-focused armaments. And if that is true, then take advantage of it by having lots of different troop types, okay? The other thing that's really powerful about that is you can always take advantage of best commanders that come out for each troop type, which I think is really valuable. So right now, that means at least one march of each troop type. If you care about Ark of Osiris League, you certainly want to have 2 marches of cavalry, and you could make an argument for 3 marches of cavalry, although typically what we see these days, 1 infantry, 1 archer, 2 cavalry, and then a final march that is filling structures. But if you're going to go fight middle with that same march, cavalry would be better. Overall, cavalry are extremely powerful in Rise of Kingdoms, despite the fact that a lot of people might look at some of these commanders and say, man, for Huo, I was hoping for more in the open field, right? They might look at not William, he's actually fantastic, but they might look at Belisarius Prime and say, man, I was hoping for more with this commander in the open field, right? With like Bert and some of these other ones. But cavalry still have an extremely strong role in the game. And if you are going to 3 cavalry marches, here's what I would recommend. Just like we started with before, you do Nevsky with Joan, you do Huo, and you pair with William, and you polish things off with Justinian and Belisarius Prime. That's probably the way I would do it. The alternative for the Justinian would be XY. He has better area of effect damage. Well, he has area of effect damage, but he does, less damage to single targets if that's what you're up against. XY is kind of a curious pick here. We talked about this at, Arc League today, that this was being used by 60GT, the team that is, it's got to have won more Arc League than anybody else, right? They were using this in game 1 and they lost, and they swapped out back to the Huo-William combo and they won again in the mid-fights. So, look, 3rd march at best for XY, okay? And even for Justinian in the open field, okay? We didn't really talk about him much because he is a rally commander primarily, and I think for most people, that's what you should just be using him for, and I wouldn't necessarily use him in the open field. We got a lot of other options as described, right? Nevsky and Joan and Huo and William and Belly Prime. So plenty of things I would use before I look to a Justinian in the open field. But if you're doing 3 marches, consider it. I would not go to 4 marches of cavalry personally. In this day and age, I think it's better to have more diversity because again, your armaments are going to be diverse, so you may as well take advantage of it. If you're wondering how all the cavalry combos fit into hey, so what are all the best marches I can make in the game right now? Check the card that'll be right over here. That video has everything you need. Click it. Open field mastery with talents.